Lady Zirath had employed 17 bodyguards before Marcus Chen. Each had failed her test within 3 planetary rotations. The Valkyrian noblewoman reclined in her observation chamber, her crystalline eyes fixed on the security feeds displaying her private vault. She had arranged it perfectly this time. 3 priceless artifacts scattered across her desk in deliberate carelessness. The orb of Kandros, worth enough to buy a small moon, the stellar crown of the 4th dynasty, embedded with consciousness-storing gems, and her personal favorite bait, a data crystal containing access codes to her family's entire fortune, left sitting atop a stack of mundane reports. Marcus had been in her service for exactly 47 standard hours, long enough to learn the vault's security patterns, long enough to notice her forgetfulness, long enough, she calculated, for greed to override loyalty. She watched him enter the vault on his routine patrol, his human frame moving with that peculiar efficiency his species was known for. He paused at the desk. His hand reached out. Zirath leaned forward, her auxiliary breathing membranes fluttering with anticipation. Here it comes, she thought. The disappointment she'd felt 16 times before. Humans were supposed to be different. Their reputation across the galaxy suggested integrity, honor, some indefinable quality that made them valuable. But reputation, she'd learned, rarely survived contact with opportunity. Marcus's hand hovered over the orb of Kandros. Then, instead of pocketing it, he picked it up carefully and carried it to the reinforced case across the room. He placed it inside, sealed the lock, and input his personal security code, linking the case's alarm directly to his neural implant. Zirath's membrane flutter stopped. That was unexpected. She watched as Marcus returned to the desk, collected the stellar crown with almost reverent care, and placed it in a separate secured case. The data crystal he examined for a long moment, turning it over in his scarred fingers. Then he encrypted it with a secondary lock that would alert both him and Zirath if anyone accessed it, including herself. But he wasn't finished. Marcus pulled up the vault's holographic security grid and began making adjustments. He repositioned sensors, tightened response times, and flagged the desk area as a high-risk zone requiring biometric verification for approach. He spent the next 2 hours methodically improving defenses that Zirath's previous bodyguards, and she herself, had considered sufficient. When he finally settled into position near the vault entrance, he wasn't relaxing. His eyes swept the room in regular patterns. His posture suggested readiness, and he'd positioned himself where he could monitor both the secured cases and the entrance simultaneously. Zirath felt something she rarely experienced, curiosity untainted by suspicion. She left her observation chamber and made her way to the vault, her elongated limbs carrying her soundlessly through the corridors. She'd confront him, demand an explanation for his actions. Perhaps this was an elaborate scheme. Secure the items now, steal them later when her guard was down. The vault door opened at her approach. Marcus stood immediately, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon before recognition stopped the motion. "Lady Zirath," he said, his voice carrying that flat professional tone she'd heard from every bodyguard before him. "I wasn't expecting you at this hour. Is there a security concern?" She gestured toward the secured cases with one of her forearms. "Explain what you've done." A flash of something crossed his face, concern perhaps, or uncertainty. Very human expressions, difficult for her species to fully parse. "Ma'am, I found several high-value items left unsecured. I've temporarily placed them in—" "I left them there," she interrupted, her translator rendering her clicking speech into Galactic Standard. Deliberately, silence stretched between them. Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. When he spoke again, his voice was colder. "A test. Every bodyguard I've employed is stolen from me within 3 days," Zirath said, moving closer. "Valkyrians, Horthans, Crystallids, species famous for their honor and integrity. All thieves, all liars. I assumed humans would be no different. And you left bait worth more than I could earn in 1,000 lifetimes to prove your assumption." It wasn't a question. Marcus's eyes, she noticed, held no anger. Instead, there was something that looked like disappointment, but not directed at her. "Yet you secured them," she said. "Why?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, his gaze drifting to the cases he'd locked. "On Earth, before I took this job, I worked personal security for a wealthy family. The father liked to test his staff the same way. Leave money around, valuables, see who'd take the bait. He looked back at her. His daughter was kidnapped while he was busy testing the new housekeeper. He'd been so focused on catching thieves that he'd forgotten to hire protectors. Ziraeth's membranes went still. The daughter? We got her back. But it took 3 weeks and she was never the same. Marcus's expression hardened. You hired me to guard you and your property, Lady Ziraeth. That's what I was doing. Your possessions were vulnerable, so I secured them. If you want to test my loyalty, do it after you're safe, not by creating security gaps that could get you killed. You could have simply taken them, she pointed out. Been off-world before I noticed. I could have, Marcus agreed. And you'd be short 1 bodyguard and several artifacts. Meanwhile, whoever breached your previous guards would know you're testing your security, instead of maintaining it. You'd be more vulnerable than ever. He shook his head. Ma'am, with respect, my job isn't to prove I'm trustworthy. My job is to keep you alive. Trust is what you decide after I've done that job well. Ziraeth felt her perception shifting, realigning around this human who'd somehow failed her test by passing it too well. She'd spent years trying to catch someone stealing. Marcus had spent 2 hours making sure no one could. The previous bodyguards, she said slowly, when they stole from me, they proved themselves unworthy. But I was testing for the wrong thing, wasn't I? You were testing for honesty and isolation, Marcus replied. But honesty without competence is just pride. You needed someone who'd do the job regardless of whether you were watching. He gestured at the security improvements he'd made, someone who sees an open door and closes it instead of walking through. She looked at the vault with new eyes, seeing not the bait she'd laid but the vulnerabilities she'd created. Each previous test had been a breach waiting to happen, a weakness advertised to anyone paying attention. She'd been so certain of being betrayed that she'd practically orchestrated it. I owe you an apology, Ziraeth said, the word strange in her translator but necessary. And a raise. Marcus actually smiled at that, the expression transforming his face. The apology I'll accept. The raise we can negotiate after I've actually protected you from a real threat instead of one you created yourself. Bold words for someone who's been employed less than 2 days. Ma'am, with respect, I'm not employed to be meek. His eyes returned to their pattern of scanning the room. I'm employed to keep you safe, even from your own tests. Ziraeth left the vault with her artifacts more secure than they'd ever been, and a bodyguard she hadn't realized she'd been searching for. As she passed through the doorway, she heard Marcus behind her, still adjusting sensors, still improving defenses, still guarding against threats whether she manufactured them or not. She'd tested for loyalty and found something far more valuable. Someone who understood that the job mattered more than proving himself worthy of it. Later that night, reviewing the security logs, she saw Marcus had flagged her own access patterns as suspicious after she'd entered the vault during off hours. He'd prepared to defend her property even from her. Humans, she decided, weren't just different. They were exactly the kind of different the galaxy needed, the kind that saw a test and chose to do the job anyway. The kind that understood that real loyalty wasn't about resisting temptation, but about forgetting temptation existed in the first place. The kind that, when given every reason to steal, would guard instead. Marcus Chen remained in her service for the next 20 years, during which there were 37 attempted thefts, 12 assassination attempts, and 1 incident where he'd physically carried her out of a collapsing building while she'd insisted on retrieving a minor heirloom. Not once did he steal from her. But then, he'd never needed to. He'd been too busy doing his job.